Hi, welcome. Excited to have you here. Yes. So, should we start with a quick introduction from everyone, like name and job title? Would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm Ed Greig. I'm the Chief Disruptor at Deloitte. So my job and my team's job is to work with new technology and look at how we can get it delivering real impact as quickly as possible to our clients, ourselves, and wider society.
Amazing.
I'm Simon Halstead. I run my own consultancy incubation business, ex-Yahoo, big on SSPs, supply-side technologies, and currently also working with the IAB for a couple of days a week.
Hiya, I'm Marina Graham. So I head up the Cultural Insights and Trends department at MTM. So we look at some of the bigger picture stuff of what's happening in culture and how that's impacting consumers' behaviors, attitudes, and outlooks.
And I'm Donatas Nemura, currently Group M Nexus Media Solutions, head of emerging innovation. So looking across all of our media channels and deploying new and innovative solutions to kind of delight and benefit our clients.
I'm Rob Meldrum. I run the Creative Futures team at EssenceMediacomX. And for the simplest way is to say any of the creative stuff that comes out of our traditionally media agency is where our team play in that grey area between creative agencies and media agencies.
Amazing, amazing. Excited to have you on panel. So let's start thinking about, so when thinking about the industry of tomorrow, we need to think about how the consumer of tomorrow will act. And so I would like to start with you, Marina. Can you share the significant shift in consumer behaviors that marketers should be aware of today?
Yeah, so I love diving into generations, looking at sort of generational research, different behaviors, different characteristics. And I think one really interesting thing that's happening right now is we're seeing the entrance of Gen Alpha. So those are people who are born between sort of 2010s and up to 2022. I've actually got a little Gen Alpha at home who's been keeping me up at night, but hoping for that their generation has a good future. So what's exciting about this is that Gen Z for so long has been sort of the owners and gatekeepers of culture, especially online. And we're actually starting to see a shift with this. Now, as a millennial, this brings me a little bit of joy because we've been sort of made fun of by Gen Z in loads of ways. You know, we're chuggy for everything. We got called out for the side part and the front tuck, which hit me personally. I couldn't do a mid-par, so I've stayed with it. But we're seeing this entrance of Gen Alpha, and they're bringing their own voice, sort of distinctive humor, experiences, and meme culture online. So this last year, we saw, the introduction of new slang. So one of my favorites is Riz, which is short for charisma. I always aspire to have Riz or to be a Rizzler. But we also saw a really distinct like meme culture and sort of sense of humor among Gen Alpha. So there's this huge thing about Skidbit. Actually, it's the weirdest, it's wild. It's this YouTube series, which is all about these different toilets with like faces put on them, and they're essentially meant to save the world. And it was this whole series, which gets like 20 million views per video, and loads of memes sort of arised from it. And we saw a huge backlash among Gen Z. There were so many sort of tweets, now that we're on X, I'm not sure if we call them tweets anymore. But there's loads of posts being like, what is this? Why is Gen Alpha so weird? And a lot of explainer videos. I think that's quite an interesting sign about how Gen Z is now feeling a little bit self-conscious or insecure about their role as sort of the gatekeepers of culture.
Good.
I know. I feel like it's time. It's time. But in saying that, I think Gen Z is still quite cool about this like generational transition. They're handling it well. So whereas millennials, we were in complete denial and we projected the fact that we were becoming cringe and older and a little bit less relevant in terms of online culture. Gen Z are looking to own it. You know, they're leaning into that cringiness. They're making it something that actually has currency, and that's cool. So I think that's going to be an interesting stage to look at. So we're in this period of post-cringe culture. We're actually being cringy, you know, loving something, being enthusiastic, doing whatever you want is cool, and people just aren't caring about what other people think of it. Taylor Swift is a huge example of that. So much of her success, I think, is because she's so unapologetically herself. So much of what she does is cringe. Like if you think about it, it's getting revenge on exes, talking about your first love at first sight. but for some reason, she packages it up in this really nice way, which is relatable and aspirational to people. So quickly on Gen Alpha, I think what's really interesting is we know that they're the most sort of digitally connected generation. They've grown up using more tech devices than any other gen, but they also grew up in the era of social media. So photos, videos, stories of them have been posted on social media since their birth. There's this concept called sharenting, where millennial parents and older Gen Z parents are sharing loads of content of their kids. So we're seeing celebrities like the Kardashians, their offspring, Northwest, Penelope Disick, they're becoming influencers in their own right. They're huge sort of forces in Gen Alpha culture. And now beauty brands are actually trying to tap into that and get marketing deals with them and brand partnerships. So I think there's going to be a huge force of sort of new faces that's coming to the fore. But I think also what's interesting about this is the sort of privacy implications. So obviously these kids aren't consenting to their parents posting photos of them as babies. So as they're growing up, we're actually seeing a little bit of like social recoil among Gen Alpha. So another celebrity example of that was Gwyneth Paltrow's daughter actually commented on one of her posts, her mom's post of her being like, we discussed this, like we said, do not post this. And I think that's sort of spurring on the conversation of consent and privacy issues with Gen Alpha. And I think as a generation, they're actually set to be less open and willing to share things online. They're engaging much more with professionalized content rather than with that personal stuff. And they don't want to be the star of content, actually. And I think that's an element of sort of self-awareness. They've seen the consequences of oversharing. Millennials and Gen Z are very prone to oversharing. I just think about the Facebook albums that we used to make dedicated to a night out with zero curation and zero sort of thought behind it. And then with Gen Z, we're seeing trauma dumping culture where you can literally get the inside scoop of everyone's mental health issues. And so there seems to be a backlash to that. They're becoming savvier. They understand the value of their personal brand and they don't feel the need to share it with everyone.
That is very, very insightful. So, Donatas, how can media companies then use those insights to stay culturally relevant?
So first point, I think there's a lot Marina talked about, and it's really really exciting to hear these things. Like it comes back to the basics, I would say. So first of all, kudos to all the companies that actually engage in this research that Marina just talked about. Understanding like what's driving the culture, how it's evolving, understanding different generations. Like I would say not a lot of companies do that. So the starting point is creating that feedback loop, getting the right insights, partnering with the right companies to allow them to derive those insights. Because a lot of the kind of day-to-day flow of data that the companies get are just stats on like consumption. It doesn't really give you that detail of like cultural insight and the ability to really go under the skin of their consumers, the wider society, and so on. So that's like a really important element. And I think I would say a lot of our leading clients engage in that. A lot of our leading partners, in terms of like media partners, inventory partners, engage in that as well, and that allows them to succeed. So the first point is just get those insights in, both in terms of research and then kind of ongoing flow of data to really monitor the trends. The second one is tap into that. So make sure you are able to go with a data-driven approach to your, across the whole of your strategy, but content creation, engagement strategy, all the touch points that you use to engage with your user. So going beyond your own platform, thinking about the other media channels, like the emerging channels, when you talked about kind of social media, identifying those like subculture or fringe creators that really speak to these kind of new emerging trends and being able to tap them for expanding and getting their own perspective on what they're doing. So think about Netflix, for example, launching a show. Like their strategy around their content launches is amazing because they've got merchandising, they've got kind of social real life events, they've got pop-ups. There's a lot of buzz created, and there's a lot of I think space for people to provide their own view and give their own interpretation, like referring back to kind of Gen A and what Marina talked about. So I think a lot of that is really important. And then using all those insights, all the data to also inform your content creation, not only in terms of the actual, like the content itself, let's say like TV shows, like content that people consume, but also kind of, let's say, derivatives of that, different formats, different platforms that you can engage on. So they really have an expansive view
Yeah,
on that.
amazing. Thank you. Building on platforms, Rob, I saw also you're nodding. Thinking about this in terms of how people use media, what new ways do you think will come up for using platforms and placing ads? And how can advertisers keep up with those changes?
Right. So
Big question.
I think first of all, it's worth looking at the context or just the amount of platforms and the potential we have to reach people with advertising, taking the data and the insights, and how do we use that. And so before we think about maybe the formats, I'm thinking more about the people that we're trying to reach. And so they're incredibly demanding. There are so many things and places and platforms and so on that they can use to entertain themselves, or ultimately to get some sort of value from. And if they don't like what they're seeing, they'll go somewhere else. It's quite straightforward. So it's incredibly difficult to reach people, regardless of whether actually you're launching a new show or or even just trying to serve them an ad. But what they are ultimately looking for, and what we start with, is value of some description. And in advertising, we're thinking about value most normally in the context of relevance. And so that value could be, if it's relevant to you, so that piece of advertising, if it's relevant to you, then you're less likely to skip past it or to be annoyed by it, or it feels less interruptive, and instead actually quite useful. And so if you start with that, and then you start thinking about all the different platforms that you can reach people on, you need the data, you need the insights, you need to be thinking about what that piece of value, what that piece of relevance might be that you can use in order to then get someone to not skip straight past your ad, and instead read it, watch it, click through, buy it, depending on whatever your advertising you're trying to do.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of our time looking at contextual advertising. So that would be, kind of in our now cookieless world, how do we make an ad relevant on a website?
Yeah.
You need to think about the context of which it sits.
Yeah. Sorry.
So and so that context might be that it's the ads on a page about food, and so that ad needs to know where that is, and it tweaks either its copy or its video or even the price or the product or whatever it might be, and hopefully the idea is that with that ad being more contextually relevant, it's more likely for someone to interact with it. Now, with that comes, and I saw, actually, I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but I saw kind of later on we're talking about addressability. And that's really now what we are focusing our efforts on, which is having a proper addressable creative strategy. So if you think about what that really means is serving the right ad to the right person at the right time. And again, another buzzword, and we put it right at the top, AI, far more than a buzzword. It's going to absolutely revolutionize everything. And how we're using that to either allow us to identify the right person or even create the ad for us. And so from maybe making hundreds of ads, which feels crazy, to then millions of AI generated ads.
Absolutely. And as you just mentioned AI, I think, Ed, you said AI isn't a magic bullet. So I think it connected to this is what unexpected things might happen with AI, and how should company and marketers prepare for these surprises?
Yeah, I think AI certainly has the potential to have a huge impact, as Rob says. But I think the motto of our team is fall in love with the problem, not in love with the solution, which I think is what Marina has been saying and Donatus has been saying is make sure you really understand those the people who your potential customers who you're reaching out to. And I think, the risk, I think, with AI is that in a world where already we are, the attention economy is already rammed, as Rob alluded to, you then are adding more content to that, which just then makes the problem worse and makes people, retreat even further from it. And so I think I think we need to be really careful with it, because we've got this ridiculous situation now where you've got some people using AI to write emails, and then you've got the person on the other end summarizing the email down to the bullet points that it was originally. It's like, I think that requires a cultural shift so that people are okay with sending short emails, rather than us using like AI as a mediator in the middle. And I think that's the thing that we need to be really careful of with advertising. And I mean, as Donatus was saying, the understanding kind of cultural shifts and understanding content, I think, has to come before being data driven, because I think the issue at the moment is that our data-driven approach is leading stuff that looks good in terms of numbers, but actually is being gamed, or is being, is actually not translating into kind of real world impact. And so I think that's what we need to avoid. I mean, there's a big thing with, don't use AI to kind of paper over bad technical or strategic decisions that you've made in the past. Use this as an opportunity to step back and think about how we can maybe approach things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yes.
So I think it's really difficult when we use the term AI, because AI is hundreds of things, right? So how will AI impact media? Its biggest impact will be felt in optimization, in stuff you don't see. That's actually where it's really advancing from machine learning to true AI. That's where you'll see real, in fact, you won't see real advantage, right? That's where there'll be significant success. And you can see that to a degree with things like PMAX from Google, lots of issues with that. I'm sure John may touch on that in a bit. But that's where I think there'll be a lot of evolution. There is a lot of benefit for iteration as well on the creative side and creative testing, but it's not just the solution. You still need the problem to solve and the idea. And coming from what Marina also said, there's a real old-fashioned, I am old-fashioned, so it's all right. There's a real old-fashioned media thing. It makes sense you're talking to the right person in the right voice at the right time. So recognise, I can't even remember what generation I am. That's how old I am. But, make certain you're speaking to... thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of thing I'm even older. Make certain you're talking the right tone to Generation X, in the right environments for Generation X, for Generation Alpha. Terrifying.
Yeah.
But but that's also just good classic media planning.
Yeah.
Right? That's good classic media buying and creative work.
And I think just to quickly pick up on that, I think one of the things that we're seeing in line with what Marina was saying is that there's a big push around people kind of following their passions online, passions being a real entry point into community building as well. And I think that's where, you talk about the difficulty with addressability with ad blockers and with the demise of cookies, means that it is much harder to be relevant and and address the audience correctly. Whereas with community building, then you are kind of curating that space. And I think it's obviously the metaverse hit a level of hype that was unsustainable and was not really justified. But actually, some of the online community part of that you see in places like Roblox and Fortnite, which Gen Alpha are incredibly comfortable with, don't even view it as anything special. I think that potentially is an avenue that people should be looking to tap into. So rather than trying to insert yourself into someone's kind of media journey with an ad and trying to make that relevant, when it's probably going to get blocked, or it's going to get clicked on by a bot or whatever, you instead, actually, by doing the community building thing, which I think is going to become more of a trend, that then gives you an opportunity to have the right space to be able to talk to people in the right way.
I think also there's a lot of stuff about like beyond demographics, and how now in a lot of ways that you have to look at audiences based on those shared interests, based on how they identify themselves, because people are presenting themselves and identifying themselves by so many different ways now, because there are so many niche communities, there's so many ways for self-presentation online that you kind of have to go, beyond the demographic factor.
There's a really good survey by UTA and Vox which is about the metaverse, but again, but actually addresses that kind of online identity piece, and is really good. 5,000 people, well worth looking at, because it addresses exactly what Marina's saying. And a lot of that younger generation, well, half of them are more comfortable with their kind of online persona than they are with the one that they present to family and friends at school. And so that's a big shift, and I think that's a problem as well. I think that we need to get to a place where people are comfortable wherever they are. But I do think that is a very important leading indicator to say that this online space, you need to kind of work differently in that online space, and you need to use that to your advantage.
Thank you. Thinking about different platforms, with connected TV, are we predicting any shift? And what are your predictions on that side of things, that channel?
Okay, so before my current role, I spent 3 years working on addressable TV solutions at GroupM, so a topic very kind of dear to my heart. So like from a business perspective, like, and this is just like statistics and forecasts based on what we know about the kind of connected TV space already. It's like one of the top 2 growing kind of spend lines in advertising globally. The second one is retail or commerce media. So it's definitely got a kind of bright future ahead from that perspective. From a consumer perspective, again, like I'm just thinking about 2024, amazing year in terms of new service launches, like amazing content pipeline with some kind of delays from 2023 due to writer and actor strikes. So from a consumer perspective, a lot of choice, a lot of services to subscribe to, quite painful. Coming back to the business side, although advertising line looks like really positive, like if you think about big broadcast and TV network businesses, they're like struggling in terms of like trying to find out what the right model is. The transition from linear TV or broadcast to streaming or connected TV hasn't been a great one. The likes of Disney just jumped into it and kind of started leading, but now we're seeing across the industry that with a lot of followers deploying the same kind of model and approach, economics becoming much more challenged. So I think next couple of years, consolidation within the business line, figuring out what the right model is. We're definitely going to see that. Coming back to the consumer, they will be the winners out of that. And also just a few things that are just happening immediately, and things that like I'm hearing about like every day, like the new streaming service launches, like Amazon Prime deploying advertising, like that's sending shockwaves through the industry. A massive move, because there will be so many advertising users from the moment they launch, because they're deploying across their whole footprint. We didn't have that before. So it'll be, I think, a year of transformation in terms of that. And then coming back, the final point I'll make, coming back to what Rob was saying, addressable creative, or what we talk about as a kind of total addressability of media or TV. So when you have addressable media in terms of the way we buy media, and addressable creative in terms of how we deploy different creative assets to different audiences, that in combination has a lot of potential. We've done some research on that together with System One, who's a kind of ad testing business that I think been mentioned in I think any event I've been going to for the last year. It shows that deploying that addressable creative together with addressable media brings a lot of business value, both in terms of short-term growth, so short-term impact on the business results, having aired the ad, long-term in terms of brand building, recognition, and long-term returns in terms of business revenue, and also delights kind of the viewer. So it's an interesting statistic that they track with audiences seeing creative advertising that is both relevant and resonant to them culturally makes them happier. A very simple thing to say, but I said, like, after we've done that research, it's like, that's what I can say to people now. Like, our ads make people happier. Amazing.
I love that.
I think it's also really important with CTV to recognise both its phenomenal growth, but against the backdrop of decline of traditional linear. Yeah. And so TV as a category isn't necessarily growing. It's how and where it's being accessed and delivered. And actually, just my other personal bugbear is each market in Europe is substantially different to the US, a lot of our narrative around CTV is US driven. And so we need to really think about what does it mean in the context of each country we're in. There are still very good, very successful stories in each country. But I think sometimes just some moderation on that hype curve is really important. That said, I think the next 3-4 years we'll see substantial growth in that stream CTV opportunity in these European markets.
Thank you very much. So I think time went very, very fast. Just before we wrap up, can I have one prediction in your area, something that you think about will happen, like a headline, in terms of from obviously media and advertising perspective? So what is your one prediction for the future? That will, yeah.
I'll have a crack, because I did do this at another future media event recently, and I don't think this is necessarily a good thing, but I predicted the creation of a totally artificial reality show, which, again, there'll be advertising on it, so it's relevant to advertising. But it was called. There's a video. If you look online, it's Love A Island, and so it would just be large language models talking to each other and dating. And so I made a video of it using AI tools, and so you can watch that online. So I'm going to reuse that prediction because I spent a day making
Make that show.
Yeah, I know. Have a look. Get my view count now.
Yes. How?
So one thing that I was going to talk about is I think that we're going to see a new iteration of like the digital detox. People are going offline, as sort of Ed was saying in terms of our online personas. People are sort of socially awkward. There's a lot of digital fatigue. They want to go back into IRL. We're seeing a huge sort of growth of dumb phones, so phones that are designed to do sort of like absolutely the bare minimums. Kendrick Lamar just launched one which sold out in a day. We're seeing the resurgence of print media, sort of like old school stuff. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a pendulum swing to IRL, sort of offline, tangible passions and pursuits.
Can I dive in? Mergers, breakups, and a backlash. Right.
Is that on Love A Island, or is that?
Yeah, quite possibly. But I think lots of consolidation within the industry is still to happen and needs to happen. I do think some large companies are going to get more restricted in where they're able to operate and how they operate. The gatekeeper judgments from the EU are really interesting in that regard. But I think there is going to be a backlash against, to your point about both detoxing and potentially against actually AI, where people will buy into Love AI Island, but want to know it's Love AI Island and will backlash where it isn't clear.
I really, because I wanted to, when we were discussing it, I really wanted to make that point, because my background's agriculture and food, and so we've seen that kind of movement around physical fitness and diet and things like that, and I think, as Marina says, I think we're starting to see that, and so I guess I'm encouraged that the movement around diet has happened, because then hopefully that same thing will happen around misinformation and being
and it's sort of cool to be in that backlash too. Like, it's sort of cool to be rejecting of tech's like all-encompassing control over our lives, and I think that's positive too, because people are just taking more sort of ownership.
Absolutely.
Like taking a cold shower, you respect it, but you're like, also, could I do it?
Rob.
Yeah, exactly.
Rob, any predictions from your hand?
Yeah, so I'm going to go slightly different actually.
Okay.
But just thinking about creative potential of and how I see people using technology and kind of bringing it back actually to AR. So
Nice.
I've always had a passion for that, AR and VR, and I think
yeah, you're all listening.
Yeah. I thought you'd like this one.
Yeah.
Funnily enough.
Yes.
And
I haven't
wasn't
paid
told
him
to
or
say
anything.
this
It's
either.
organic.
Yeah, I wasn't told. It was fine. But so the Oculus 3 launch and kind of that proper, usable, affordable to a certain extent piece of technology, which is kind of giving us a real insight into mixed reality. And I think then kind of thinking about AR in different ways. So actually, what was the iteration of AR last year within advertising? It was actually kind of the CGI stuff. And all of it was great. Like, one of my favorites was the North Face jacket on Big Ben, for example. Now that's gone up here in terms of the craziness, and everyone got very excited. And now we're going, okay, well, we're past that bit. Now what do we do with it? And I just think kind of a mix of using your whatever tech you have, just more naturally, I think will be something that we'll see more of over the next few years.
Amazing.
Let's go back
Donat.
to what Ed was saying earlier about AI. It made me think of a kind of near future where someone may go, just have your AI speak to my AI, kind of, because it does feel like we may get to that kind of Black Mirror type scenario.
I think there's a not very good film starring Jack Whitehall which has that exact scenario called Robots. I think it's very good.
So, but bringing back to kind of my area and what we're excited about for this year, I think it's just kind of two main areas. So how do we marry up commerce and connected TV? Commerce in the sense of like all the amazing data that is available on consumer purchases, in-store retail behaviors, and how we can kind of deploy that through media channels to drive sales, to understand how people are buying. That's one. And then the other one just relates back to what Rob was saying, just that addressable creative, making it relevant and resonant to audiences will go far.
Amazing. All right. Thank you for sharing all of your insights. We're at that time. Just to wrap up our panel, we heard 2024 seems that it will be a big year. We got lots of, things happening. Global election, a lot of, content will reach us, and AIs continue to disrupt what we hear and what we see in the news. Content stays keen. But we also need to, make sure that the way that we consume keep in mind that the way we consume content impacts the way that we also purchase online, right? So the two things are connected. The future seems all about making ads that fit already in what people likes and on their interest. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your insights, your experience, your thoughts. It's been really, really insightful. And thank you for our amazing panelists.
Thank you.